take a deep breath and just relax. Be in this moment. Be mindful. Be present. Allow yourself a moment of peace. You get to choose moment by moment what you create. You can create beauty in every moment and the following moment. Just allow yourself this moment of beauty.
Thank you for joining us on the Newbridge Radio Show. You can also catch us online at newbridgeradio.com. Find us on Facebook under Newbridge Radio Show or follow us on Twitter at Newbridge Radio. Now let's connect you with what's next.
Welcome back to the Newbridge Radio Show on WLTK-DB Let's Talk. I am your host, Kevin Mackey, and we are connecting you to what's next in your life. And we're here to remind you that you are important to this world, and we are sure glad to have you along on this episode of the Newbridge Radio Show. As you may know, you can find many of your WLTK-DB shows and hosts on YouTube. And you can now find this show on YouTube after many, many months of, trying. All you need to do is go to the search bar in YouTube and type in WLTK-DB. That will take you to the station YouTube page, and you can view us live as we do our broadcast on the station website. If you would like to get in touch with the Newbridge Radio Show, you can email us. Our email address is just thenewbridgeradioshow@gmail.com. Let us know what you like about the show. Let us know, if you must, what you don't like about the show. And let us know if you would like to be our guest. We love hearing from people who have figured out how to connect to what was next in their life. So drop us a line and let us know if you'd like to be our guest. Tonight on the Newbridge Radio Show, I am supremely pleased to have our next guest. He's worked hard over the last 10 years, helping nearly 1,000 people, including CEOs, tech execs, and business owners to cast off inner doubt and own their own success. He is the author of the book, Change the One Belief That Changes Your Life, The Magic of Mental Emotional Release. And he is here tonight, and his name is Eric Rosen. And I'm so pleased to have you. Welcome to the show, Eric.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Kevin. Thank you for having me here.
Well, you're sure welcome. I'm glad to have you. We had you before, but there was something that interrupted us.
Oh, a freak snowstorm.
A freak snowstorm, I know. We had to reschedule, and then oh man, that sounds so hokey. But it really was. It really was. It was a thunder snow. So I read your book some months ago, and it really is good. And you talk a little bit about in your book about your early years, and from your book, I take it that you weren't really one of the popular kids growing up. Is that true?
Oh no. I only found out maybe in my 40s that I had like a slight degree of Asperger's, and when I was a kid coming up, nobody knew what that term meant. No one had any consciousness of it, right? So I was probably not one of the cool kids because I wasn't on that kind of social wavelength yet.
Yeah, so this caused a lot of bullying, huh?
Oh yeah. But I'll tell you, these kinds of things we go through, they help us connect with what's next, because I like to say, how Einstein tells us energy can be neither created nor destroyed, only transformed. Right? So whatever terrible things you've gone through, they have the potential to be your greatest strength when you make a breakthrough.
Yep. I was one of those kids as well. I wasn't popular either. I had a really high voice.
Oh yeah.
So people were like, you sound like a cartoon. But anyway, it changed. So as you started your career, you kind of wound up in a really odd place at 21. You wound up on Wall Street,
Oh
of
yeah.
all places. But how'd you end up there?
Well, I grew up in New York,
Mhm.
and uh, my dear dad had this piece of advice, which he meant with all sincerity, was if you're closer to money, you can make more of it.
Oh, okay.
And it seemed to be very plausible to me at the time. And it was, so I went into Wall Street without an appreciation that there is a social side to that, that there is a relationship side to that. But I just kind of figured, oh, you got to get into the mathematical side. And math was never really my calling to begin with. So I
Mhm.
was kind of working at odds with my natural inclinations. And yet I slogged through about 7 years, and I wasn't going to get very far if I'm fighting my own values and inclinations. There was just not a match there.
Right. Was it just the work environment and the people involved in Wall Street, or just the
It definitely, there was definitely that aspect of it, right?
Mhm.
I didn't know at the time that I was meant to be a healer,
Mhm.
all right? And do healers really belong in the trading rooms of, Wall Street
Wall Street?
banks? It, I
I
don't know.
suppose
There
they
might be
could.
a connection there. I just haven't figured it out yet.
Right. Some of them need it.
Oh, they
There's got.
definitely, well, that's a whole other issue, right? But then again, you've got to come to a certain level of awareness before you even look in that direction.
Exactly. Exactly. So you went from Wall Street to doing something you kind of loved. You always
Yes.
knew you were a good writer, and so you became a copywriter. How was that? What was that like?
There was one thing in between, actually.
Oh,
And that was what turned out to be instructional design, but multimedia is what we called it, sort of pre-internet.
mhm.
CD-ROM was very popular. And so I wanted to get into animation and computer modeling. And again, my art skills from childhood were not polished enough over the intervening time to kind of make it into the Hollywood scene or the even the games industry. And I really didn't have an interest in games. So I had to find some other way to put this tech knowledge to use. And then came like multimedia based training, which eventually became e-learning.
Mhm.
And so I was a really good generalist there. I could create the instructional design for training on technical topics, do some graphics, do the programming in whatever software we were using to create the interactive experiences. And then the internet came along and I had to relearn all those skills for the internet as opposed to offline.
Right.
And that was great. But then along came outsourcing and offshoring. And they wanted you to be specialized like in one of those particular niches, like the instructional design or the graphic design. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be the generalist. I enjoyed the variety.
Right.
And then that whole kind of career avenue pretty much dried up for someone who's at an age where he's got to, pay for a mortgage and kids, and
Right.
especially in Silicon Valley, which is the highest cost of living locale in the country. So with that, eventually I said, well, I got to take stock here. What is it I'm really good at that even the executives aren't? And that is writing. And then I discovered copywriting. And that kind of leads us to where we are now in a big way, because with copywriting, for those who don't know what it is, and I find it's surprising that 1 in 2 American adults probably doesn't know what it is or thinks it's something different from what it is, because they may think it has to do with copyrights and the law, right? And that's not it at
Mhm.
all. It's because it's COPYWRITING, right? And that would mean writing, right? But it's the
Right.
written
Right.
word. You're writing copy for the
Mhm.
sake of making sales or getting
Mhm.
people to download something or opt in, right? So this was an area where I was able to flourish to a degree because it forces you, just like the instructional design does, it forces you to think about things from the other person's point of view. Right?
Exactly.
For training, it's like, well, how will how will it be easiest for them to learn this? Whereas for copywriting, it's like, well, how do you remove the fear or the resistance to taking the next action? be it a download or actually, make a purchase online or something. So that was salesmanship in print. And that was a really good lead in, because as I wanted to get better at that craft, I started getting exposed to hypnosis and neuro-linguistic programming, which we call NLP.
Right.
And that was where these two areas sort of merged for me. And then eventually copywriting gave way, and hypnosis, NLP, and healing took over.
Right. So, so your fellows in the copyright part were doing hypnosis and NLP
Well,
to
it's
be
not that
better
my
writers.
fellows, it's just that what I had heard was that, like, if you remember back in pre-internet times,
Hmm.
there was something called the long form sales letter, right? Where it could be like a 7 or 8 page ad, but it looks like it's an article. Today, they
Hmm.
might call that an advertorial. And what I had heard was that the copywriters who got the most responses, meaning people would take a scissor, maybe they'll cut out a coupon, put their name on the form, and mail in their check, right? The people who, and those things were being rigorously tested. They'd have like two different headlines, and otherwise maybe everything else about the ads was the same, right?
Hmm.
They would be testing, and this idea of A/B testing goes back even pre-Civil War,
Hmm.
where they would be testing which appeal had the greatest response rate,
Right.
right? And Google AdWords, when it came around in the early 2000s, it was already taking that whole area of expertise and putting it on steroids.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So like prior to the internet, the long form sales letter, there was like an A-list group of copywriters. Some of them would get better results than others. And what I had heard was that some of them, those folks knew something about hypnosis.
Oh, oh, I
And
see.
once you start researching hypnosis, you learn about NLP, and the rest of the journey is, we could talk about that, but that's kind of the transition.
Hmm. And so you I know you went to night classes to train yourself in hypnosis.
That's right.
And tell me about that. How did that work for you? Were you shocked the first time you ever hypnotized somebody?
Well, I'll tell you what really made me go all in on it. It was a summer evening at the Palo Alto School of Hypnotherapy here in Silicon Valley,
Mhm.
and they were having their information evening, and the presenter said at one point that people who receive hypnosis during surgery bleed less, need less pain medication in recovery, and with some additional hypnosis afterwards, heal faster post-op.
Right.
When I heard that, that was when the inner healer awoke. It was incredible. In that moment,
Right.
I'm like, you mean there's more to being in a hypnosis practice than just stop smoking and weight loss?
Right.
Oh, I'm intrigued. I want to know more about this. What are we talking about here? Right. So that was when I kind of made the decision to go all in and learn this. I had already researched it for about 2 years and exposed myself to the whole field and got a really good sense of the history of the field and the various schools of practice and what have you.
Hmm.
Um, and then, I just said, okay, I don't know if it's really making an impact on my copy, but I think if I work with people, I'll learn it better. And then maybe it'll make the impact on the copy.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But as time went on, I'm like, I like this a lot more than copywriting.
Mhm.
This healing thing and getting people to make changes, actually helping them help themselves is really what it's all about.
Right. Right. And you say in the book, the universe will bring you the people when you help them. And so, who were some of those people that came in and helped you out then?
What do you mean that from like a professional kind of
Yep. Mhm.
mentorship point of view, or do you mean that in terms of clientele? How do
Uh,
you?
mentors. What sort of mentors came in and helped you out?
In the field of hypnosis.
Hmm.
So there was the folks I trained with at the school,
Hmm.
but then I started to say, hey, what about this NLP thing, right?
Hmm.
This neuro-linguistic programming, which I had an exposure to through copywriting, but I was like, well, how do we apply this in person? And one of my clients, this is a great story. I had a client that was like a really, to these days, I don't usually work with people for a year or 18 months, but in the early days of the practice, it just seemed to be the thing to do. And I had this woman come in. She originally wanted to do weight loss, and she was succeeding. And somewhere in that time frame, she had decided that she was going to take an NLP class. So we both went,
Hmm.
and I loved it. She took the upsell, and I didn't. I wasn't
Oh,
ready yet, I guess. And it was a big investment at the time. Now I would say it's worth, every penny, and I would do it 2 or 3 times for that, the value that I got out of it.
hmm.
Um, but it was the upsell to the master practitioner of NLP, which she took. And about a few months after that, she says, my career plans have changed. I'm not interested in taking the course. Do you want to take it?
Oh,
And the
wow.
organization, so I was gifted master practitioner of NLP. I knew that this was going to be very valuable. So I cleared my schedule, got 2 weeks off to just go down to Newport Beach and learn this from an organization that used to be called the Empowerment Partnership. They've just changed their name to Empowerment Inc. And the mentor there is Dr. Matt James, who figures very prominently in my development. He wrote the foreword to my book, Change the One Belief.
Hmm.
So he got me into this whole new realm of NLP. And then I've since the time of the book's publication, and we can talk about this more later, I've gotten onto a whole different sort of spiritual realm and using energy work with my clients that comes by way of something called Hawaiian Huna, which is
Yes.
an ancient Hawaiian um, discipline and series of practices and it's hard to say. It's like a whole philosophy and cosmology.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so getting into that also, I think Dr. Matt James, another one of my uh, big mentors, and is Dr. Patrick Scott. He's mentioned in the book his clinic in Nevada had done a major study on the efficacy of something called mental and emotional release, which is mentioned in the subtitle of the book.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a technique that helps people travel their timeline of life, bring their wisdoms of today back to who they were when they were younger, or perhaps when they were in the womb. And this is where it gets woo-woo. Perhaps previous generations and their traumas, or perhaps past lives. And you can use this mechanism to heal yourself in the past and create a domino effect or a chain reaction, and all of your baggage can go down or go poof in an instant with the right conditions and the right prompts. So what he did, Dr. Patrick Scott, is he conducted a study at this clinic on healing people from depression.
Hmm.
And because it would have been considered unethical to deny anybody the use of cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT,
Hmm.
they had the way they architected the study was very interesting. They had a control group that received only CBT, and they had a test group that received a combination of CBT and mental and emotional release, or MER as we call it.
Um,
And I think maybe there was about a dozen to maybe 15 sessions that these people went through. And
hmm.
then a year later, they checked in with these folks, and the CBT group had a 71% success rate, and the CBT MER group had a 100% success rate.
Oh, wow.
So that was when they changed the name of the technique from timeline therapy to mental and emotional release, because why name it for a feature when you can name it for a benefit?
Nice. Now, you started going through this training as well yourself.
Yes. So as part of my master practitioner training in NLP, we were also certified as master practitioners of mental and emotional release.
Hmm.
And so,
And
yes, go ahead.
yeah, so what was interesting is you say you used to suffer from social anxiety. And I'm someone as well. And you said in the book, you said it was just boatloads of stuff came off
Yeah.
when you learned this technique. And what was that like for you?
Well, it's very interesting because I do think I mentioned in that introduction to the book that at the time that I decided to get into doing hypnotherapy as a field,
Hmm.
I had been suffering from depression that was biochemically induced.
Hmm.
What I found out at some time later was that I had mercury fillings and I had them removed.
Oh, that's right.
And
Yes.
I've subsequently found out that that can be very disruptive. And so I kind of spiraled into a depression. I went and saw a psychologist for about a year,
Hmm.
and she said, and I couldn't believe her at the time. I just wasn't in the place to take her words at face value. Oh, you'd make a great hypnotherapist, right? And sure enough, she turned out to be right. But at the time, it was unthinkable to me. And
Well,
so I was looking for something beyond the psychology to get me out of this problem.
mhm.
And I was just about to I was just starting to use Wellbutrin.
Well,
And I had tried it for maybe 3 occasions. And on
mhm.
that third occasion, I had massive panic attack.
Mm.
I mean, it was
Well,
just,
we're going to
it
have
was,
to step away for a break real quickly, and we'll be
okay.
right back, Eric, after we hear this message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
I thought I might have said something.
We are controlling transmission. WLTK-DB. Let's talk. A book of mystery. A book of one man's journey. A book of the afterlife. A book you must read. Ghost and Me by 5-time award-winning author Kevin Killen is a book of one man's journey in the search of the afterlife. Read of his chilling childhood experience, his investigative journeys, and his opinions of paranormal activity. Ghost and Me by Kevin Killen, an Ozark Mountain publication. Get your copy today online or wherever books are sold. Ever wanted to host your own radio show? If your answer is yes, then the time to act is now. WLTK-DB Let's Talk is now accepting new programming more affordable than ever. You create the show idea and we'll take care of the rest. Not only do we create your program intro and provide broadcast training, but also syndicate you to popular outlets like Apple and Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and more. You get all of this starting at $100 per month. 3 packages to choose from and built to make your wallet happy. Contact us at WLTK-DB.com with your show idea and let's bring your dream to life. All topics accepted and you have full rights to your program. Contact us today and reserve your spot on WLTK-DB Let's Talk. What are you waiting for? Let's do this.
Go on and assure yourself. Give yourself permission to succeed, or make as many mistakes as you need to.
Welcome back to the New Bridge Radio Show on WLTK-DB Let's Talk. I am your host, Kevin Mackey, and we are having a great conversation with our guest, Eric Rosen. And just before we went to break, Eric, you were just talking about how you were coming out of depression, how you were beginning to heal yourself.
Right. So again, I had, against every inclination, taken up the willingness to try a med.
Mhm.
And it happened to have been Wellbutrin. On the third time that I took it, I had these panic attacks. And I said, something's not right here. And a close friend of mine who's a healer in some alternative healing arts said, well, if you take these, what do you call them? Amino acids and minerals and vitamins, you'll get the same benefits. And I did some research and found a psychiatrist who actually had the same protocol plus the addition of B vitamins. So I figured I'm on the right track. And like in a day or two, presto, the depression was lifted. It's like I knew from this point onwards, it's up to me to get my results. And I don't feel like something out of my control is holding me back.
Right. And so then you went on to
And that's
use
when I
it.
launched the practice, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I was amid. So I had. It's sort of like you have to take a stand for other people's breakthrough when you're in practice, And that forces you to take a stand for your own breakthrough, in parallel.
Exactly.
And so I feel like the rest of the work that had to get done was happening in tandem with me helping my clients. And it
Yeah.
was, so there may have been some facet of it that was not biochemical,
Mhm.
right? And whatever that was, it was therapeutic for me to be helping other people be therapeutic for themselves.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, was there a point where you thought, "Oh my gosh, I think that something profound has changed"? Like, was it gradual, or did you just have a moment where you're like, "I feel freer from this"?
Well, there was that day or two after getting on to those homeopathic substitutes, for the meds. So that was at that moment, I felt like I took my head out of the jaws of a lion, and I think I mentioned that in the book. But from that point forward, the next big one was completing Master Practitioner of NLP
Mhm.
and learning mental and emotional release.
Exactly.
And yeah, I was able to find that I could blend all of these disciplines, hypnosis, NLP, mental and emotional release, and get incredible results with people.
Mhm.
That just, it really blew my mind that when you blend these things together, they're far more powerful than how you are taught them in isolation.
Right. And so, some of the uh, some of the mental emotional releases are toxic identity beliefs.
Yes, yes. That's how I look at it. That's my interpretation. And it's how I took these tools and ran with them.
Exactly. And in the book, you give the dirty dozen of of toxic beliefs, and many of the toxic beliefs all start with "I am something."
Yes, I can roll it off the tongue right now if you like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
certainly.
everyone.
It's like, I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm bad. I'm broken. I'm invisible. I'm dumb. I'm dirty. I'm a loser. I'm weak. I'm unworthy. I'm a sinner. I'm not enough, which could be different from I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
Yeah, just one word's difference. But you know what? That one word's difference would make a tremendous difference in the person's breakthroughs.
Right,
And I found this on a few occasions, and that's what prompted me to write the book.
right.
Because the key word in the title is one, change the one belief. Well, which one is it? Is it I'm not good enough, or is it I'm not enough? Right?
Yeah,
Or I am worthless, or I'm unworthy.
yeah.
The languaging matters to the nth degree.
Yeah, well, you want to know something funny, Eric, is when I was reading the book and starting out, I was like, hey, wait a minute. I might just have all of these.
Yes, that's the thing about beliefs. They exist in clusters, right?
Right,
And so
right.
I help with clients use an analogy of the solar system. So
Mhm,
we have the sun, and then we got all these planets, right?
mhm,
They're satellites. If we pick a satellite belief, mental and emotional release will still help them dump baggage, and the results will be fairly good.
mhm.
You get that belief spot on word for word, and the mental and emotional release will get amazing results
Yeah.
with the baggage dumping. So it's the difference between good and great. And so I've developed a lot of things I do in sessions with clients to really get precise on the languaging. And now the book came out in 2018, and I've since been able to bring in HUNA and energy and
Mhm.
muscle testing and all kinds of other modalities to make sure we've got that belief word for word.
Yes. I went through the timeline myself
Uh-huh.
to try to figure out, narrow it down, kind of figure out which one of these is the belief that came. And as I was doing the timeline, I was shocked. So I did it in 3-year increments.
Okay.
And I was actually shocked when I went through the first 9 years of everything
Mhm.
that had happened. I'm like, well, no wonder I can't make sense, man. Look at all this stuff that happened. We moved 3 times. My parents got divorced. It was just a ton of stuff that you never considered. You have people kind of make breakthroughs as they're going through this and doing the timeline and going like, what?
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Now, yeah, I have various level programs. The introductory one has a page or, well, about 2 or 3 pages in the appendix.
Hmm.
And we break it down as to what people do in each of those sessions. So in the first session, we got to find that belief. and that's a hypnotic regression back to birthday, actually day of birth. Preview your life as a 4-act play.
Mm-hmm.
Each act of the play happens to correspond with a stage of human psychological development. Once you come through all 4 acts of the play, you can confer with your 5 to 7-year-old self and answer this question. What belief about self would we have to be holding for our journey to have played out as it has so far?
Mm-hmm.
And the belief we're looking for is the one that feels the worst and explains the most about the journey. It's got to do both.
Right.
All right. Because feels the worst meets the kid where he's at or she's at. Explains the most, keeps the adult interested in helping out.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're getting them to work together.
Right.
All right. And so we can find a cluster of beliefs from that great long list. And there's more I didn't even mention,
Right.
which I could rattle off.
Well, so
But, you know.
what was interesting is I went through the timeline for my own self and doing my own work in this. I found the belief, and the belief, the toxic belief was I'm unwanted.
Okay.
And it started from moving and my parents being divorced, and then going up into growing up with that belief and becoming an adult with that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's what it is. That's what it's been this whole time.
And you know what? I would say that you could probably peel that onion skin one layer back and find another I am belief. And I think I talk about this in the book. It's been a few years, so I can't remember. Be that as it may,
Right.
I'll say to clients, if they say, I'll even tell them ahead of time, it's not going to be I'm unwanted or I'm unloved. And the reason why, and this is subtle, it gets into language, is the ED at the end of unwanted or I'm unloved would mean that it's, for in this example, it's little Kevin assessing others, assessing little Kevin. Okay? That's a form of mind reading. We're not interested in that, right? What we're interested in this case, would be little Kevin's assessment of little Kevin.
Oh, yes, I see that.
Okay? There's other kinds of ground rules in getting to the belief. Another one would be that it can't be a state, like I'm scared or I am lonely. Because I would ask, does that seem true 100% of the time? Right? If you can't say yes to that, then it's a state. A state will come and go.
Right.
But what the belief is an enduring character assessment of self by self.
Right.
So it becomes a kind of personal, private, portable prison. Right? I'm forever trapped in that belief, and it would endure. So, for example, I'm unlovable is different from I'm unloved. Right? I'm unloved is talking about what other people think. Right? Whereas I'm unlovable is the kid assessing the kid.
I see that now. Now, as you go through this process, do you rely on the person's unconscious mind to give you kind of the whereabout, the belief start, so to speak?
Yes. So the whole start of the program is to get to that belief word for word. And so again, we've got all kinds of ways to compare different beliefs. For example, it may be a person thinks it's I'm unlovable and it's I'm not good enough. Well, I might ask them then, compare. Which of these beliefs feels worse and explains more about the journey so far? Right now, much more often than not, we get it right in that first session. There are ways to that I have as backups to make sure if we don't have it perfect, we will in the first 10 minutes of like the next session. But the important, and I also have like a whole framework for people to declare what success looks like spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically before the first session. And then at the end of the first session, they're already marking this like it were a progress tracking sheet. And then at the start and finish of all the subsequent sessions, we're always coming back to the tracking sheet. So you know in the most black and white terms about the true progress you're making spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we got to get that belief spot on. And again, there's all kinds of ways to do this. And nowadays, I include energy work and muscle testing to make sure we really have it word for word. Then we introduce mental and emotional release. That's when I'll teach a person how to actually do the process. And then we actually do the process. And that's where they'll release, at a minimum, anger and sadness. In their first session, again, this is the entry-level program in the book, in the appendix. The second session, they're going to release fear, hurt, guilt, shame if it's relevant. Usually guilt gets it automatically. The belief, and then anxiety if they can still find it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so in the third session, they'll put in a new belief for who they are now and where they want to go in life, not who they were when it formed at 7, which was a good 3 years before the conscious mind even arrived.
Right.
And then, right, so that's why people don't know. That's why this stuff keeps seeming to haunt them over time, because they're not consciously aware of it. And so, and then session 4 has all kinds of different options that I tailor to the individual about building on a new belief or getting to some next level. But the second session, when they release, by that time they've released anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt, then we release the belief.
Yes.
Because why is that? Because the kid forms that belief at 7, and there's no conscious mind to add a critical faculty to the analysis, right? So of who am I, right? That's what the kid wants to answer at 7 is who am I?
Right.
Right. But there's no conscious mind to be a counterweight to the emotions of anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt, even at low thresholds, warps the kid's answer to the question. And that's where the I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I'm bad, I'm broken, all that stuff comes from.
Right.
Right. So now that they dump the baggage of anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt, then we say it's time to ditch the belief.
Right.
And at that point, it's actually very easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to get to that point first.
And so what? So as you've done this, and as people have released these, do they notice a huge difference?
Oh, yes. And it's showing up in their tracking sheet.
Nice.
Right. And so, and that's the interesting thing. Like, for example, do you remember maybe 3 years ago, there was a popular Wonder Woman movie?
Yes.
Gal Gadot, the actress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know, for whatever reason at that time, and this was more with women than men at that time in my practice, but that's how the story goes. I had these women coming in who had 30s, 40s, 50s, and I never talked about Wonder Woman. They never talked about Wonder Woman. But I really do believe we have some kind of collective unconscious or an ether,
Right.
shared hive mind, or whatever you want to call it. And so in session 1, we discover, oh, it's I'm not good enough, or I'm unlovable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Come session 3, we go through a whole process to prepare the mind for the new belief. And once it's prepared, I say to them, okay, it's time to put your new belief in words. All I ask is that it start with I am. Whatever you put after am is up to you. And they pull it out of the ether. Wonder Woman. I am Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say to them, would you like to lock that belief in place? Yes. And we would. And so I ask you, what's the likelihood their life's going to get better because they're holding I am Wonder Woman instead of I'm not good enough or I'm unlovable?
Exactly. So how did you find out about Hawaiian Huna?
Well, I do have to credit Dr. Mac James, and also Dr. Patrick Scott is another kumu in our school of practice. What is a kumu? That's a Hawaiian word for a very reverential word for teacher.
I see.
And so there's Dr. James is carrying the lineage of a 28 generation school of practice of Huna.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Huna translated means concealed wisdom.
I see.
And so it's a lot of spiritual practices. And so our school of practice, again, has this unbroken lineage that goes back 28 generations. Now you might ask, well, why would the guy with the last name of James be carrying the lineage of ancient Hawaii, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's a whole other story in itself, but the lineage has never resided only in one family. It has changed families as the years have gone by. Dr. James's father, Tad James, had moved to Hawaii probably in that time of like the late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, among the Hawaiian youth, there was no real interest in carrying these traditions to the next generation, at least among the people who are at the core of the school of practice.
Right.
And they had certain what do you call them, precogs,
Uh-huh.
or dreams earlier in their experiences that said someday an American white guy is going to come and carry this practice on for the next generation or two.
Oh.
And it came to pass.
Hmm.
And so Tad James had learned everything he could about Hawaiian Huna. He was also a protege of, on the NLP side, he was a protege of Dr. Richard Bandler, who founded the field of NLP.
Right.
So he always had this Huna as another offering to go kind of beyond where NLP can go. NLP is really great for conscious mind and unconscious mind. Huna is really about something called the higher self.
Hmm.
All right, your spirit, your soul, your connection with God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it. And so Huna just takes this whole game to a whole nother level if you're thinking about it from a healer client perspective. And that's how I thought about it when I first came in to the offerings Dr. Matt James exposed me to.
Uh-huh.
But then after a while, it got to be more of a spiritual retreat and more about, self-growth and self-care and self-love and those kinds of things. So I'm very grateful for everything it's given me towards my practice with people. And then as it's helped me continue to grow, I can be more effective in my practice and be more effective in my life as well.
So is the healing practice sort of a hands-on healing, like
No,
hands-on energy work? Oh.
it's not like, it's like you might be thinking of Reiki, and I know you're a Reiki master. I just started
Hmm.
learning Reiki. I can't wait to learn more and get to the Reiki master level.
Hmm.
And I know Reiki also has hands-on at level 1, and then as you go up the levels, you can do things remotely and such. Huna is very much that way. It's not hands-on. It's not crystals. It's all intangible.
Hmm.
It's all invisible. You can't kind of put your finger on it, but you can summon energy. You can channel and direct energy. You can do it in person. You can do it remotely.
Hmm.
There's other beautiful aspects to it for like forgiveness, and which we call ho'oponopono, ho'o to make, pono right, ho'oponopono, make right right, or make right in a big way. So if you're holding grievances or grudges or resentments or unwillingnesses to forgive or grief,
Hmm. Hmm.
ho'oponopono is a beautiful way to clear out that kind of baggage. Sometimes I'll help people, they'll clear out massive amounts of baggage, but maybe there's still some interpersonal tinge that still rubs them the wrong way about so-and-so, whether they're past or living. And we can clear that out as well with ho'oponopono. It's a very
Yes.
spiritual, hypnotic kind of energetic process.
Yeah, we're vaguely familiar with Ho'oponopono
Oh
on
yeah.
the show. We had when in the beginning of the show we would do, and when we would end, we would do a little. We'd invite the aunties and the uncles to come,
Huh?
and we would do a little Ho'oponopono
Right.
affirmation.
Right.
I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And you know what?
Yeah.
One
And
of the.
even just that prayer has
Hmm.
done wonders for people. And
Hmm.
Ho'oponopono is sort of like open source software. I know you also worked in tech, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's sort of like open source software
Hmm.
where anyone could kind of repurpose it to their own ends and brand it the way they see fit.
Yeah.
So our way of doing it is very different from that.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's much more hypnotic. It's closed eye. It's very deep and cathartic.
Right.
Okay, so it's not like that, but again, people can kind of repurpose it any way they see fit.
Nice. Now, is it done through? Now, do you like as you learn it? Do you go through and have like a hands-on attunement or anything to move
Well,
you
in
into?
Huna, we do have ways to do energy sessions and do healing, very much like
Hmm.
Reiki. So yeah, I've done
Nice.
a few of those with people as well. And I've received a few as well. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to do. We bring in symbols. We have symbols that, like,
Hmm.
I know Reiki has symbols as well.
Right.
And we can either draw the symbols in the air and bring them to life with breath work, or we could just do it in our heads.
Hmm.
And either way, it can bring in the energy, and the energy can be directed or channeled into the chakras, which the Hawaiians call moku. Um,
Moku.
yeah, Moku. So it's the same thing as what I get. Is it Sanskrit where they say chakra? I think that's where it
Yep.
originates. So same concept, different word.
Nice. Nice. So, let me ask you about how did you adopt the term witch doctor?
Oh, because as you get into the more advanced aspects of Huna and you help people make breakthroughs, I might do a session could be very different from what it was just 3 or 4 years ago, as I was saying earlier, where the Huna started first coming in.
Mhm.
So I'm still using the hypnosis and the NLP and the mental and emotional release, but I said that all these things get more powerful as you blend them, right? So now blending in other kinds of Huna processes
Mhm.
can do marvelous things, and it can be very advantageous to do things like chanting, or breath work,
Mhm.
where I might sound like I'm breathing in a funny sort of way. You're like, right, and that to someone who's like first becoming exposed to just the idea of hypnosis, let alone any of this other stuff, that could seem kind of out there and woo woo. So I want to be
Okay.
mindful of that, all right, and meet people where they're at.
Mhm.
Okay, so chanting in Hawaiian, this kind of breath work and energy, just energy, use of energy too, could be considered. I mean, we have been exposed to this stuff for a while, and we could start to take it for granted.
Right.
If you're meeting, you got to meet people where they're at, and maybe this stuff is totally outside their realm of awareness.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so yeah, so all of this stuff combined, and without getting too far into the weeds about all of this, um, it could seem like you're dealing with a witch doctor.
Yep.
And I kind of like the juxtaposition of it, Silicon Valley's witch doctor, right?
Exactly.
Like we think Silicon Valley, we think all things scientific and nerdy and linear and logical. And then witch doctor kind of just adds a very nice counterbalance to that, the spiritual and the emotional and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I thought it was quite clever because it kind of introduces you in a way where people like, they're either gonna like want to have you on because they resonate with that, like, oh, this guy knows a thing or two, or they'll be like, I'm gonna bring him on and just read him the right act.
And
So,
you know what? I don't really, yeah, there was a time long ago where I wanted to have all the science on my side.
mhm,
And, I find when people ask me that, like, what's your success rate with this? And how does this technique work for that? And it's like, you know what? Let's take a breath, step back, and look at the motivation for the question,
right,
right? When the person asks that, they might be asking it on behalf of the greater community, but really they're asking it on behalf of themselves.
mhm,
And so if they want to rely on the stats, what they're really saying is take me out of the equation, right? And just let this be as simple as making the purchase of a product, off the shelf, like, I don't know, a jar of coconut oil
right,
or, a radio, right?
mhm,
It's not, you can't extricate yourself from the process.
exactly.
There's never such thing in life as a non-spiritual moment, right?
Right, right.
And so I these days, if they want the science, they can go to someone else. I don't have the time or energy to do all the footnoting,
Right.
right? I just want to help people get to a better place. And if they're open to taking this somewhere in between Silicon Valley and Witch Doctor, I'll meet them where they're at.
Perfect. Perfect. Hey, so in this work that you have done in the last year, um, in the weird year it's been, how
Mhm.
have you adapted?
I've
Have you
gone
been?
totally Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've gone totally Zoom since March 2020.
Hmm.
And here's a fascinating thing, Kevin. So I'll very often get the question, will it be as effective as meeting in person?
Right.
And I say they're absolutely equal. And it comes down to knowing just two things about hypnosis. One is that it's the absorption of your attention, and two, It's the narrowing of your focus.
Right.
That takes all the mystery out of it.
Hmm.
That's all it is, right? It's the absorption of your attention and the narrowing of your focus. So if we have those two things, you're going to get the same results. So as long as nobody's like pulling you away from the Zoom, right? You're going to get exactly the same results you otherwise would.
Exactly. Yeah, in the QHH world, the QHHT world of
Yes.
Dolores Cannon,
Uh-huh.
online sessions are not are not a good thing to do. And
Oh, is that right? Why is that?
well, it just is something that Dolores Cannon believed
Uh-huh.
that sessions always work much better in person.
Hmm. I think
Um,
that's a belief.
yeah. It really
Yeah.
is. It really is a belief. And so, a lot of QHH people, PT people, just kind of, had a year of just doing something else rather than continue with QHHT. So
Oh,
it's been
wow.
it's been a weird year for a lot of people.
Right.
But you know what? I have met a lot of hypnotists that were like that went undaunted into the electronic world and said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and find the best headset.
Yep.
I'm going to do a half-hour equipment check with my client, and we'll make sure they're comfortable and make sure everything works.
Hmm.
And then on the day of the hypnosis, we'll be prepared, and we'll go through, and I'll do a suggestion that if technology fails, and I think this might be one of Dolores Cannon's kind of one of her fears from the olden days, like what if the computer breaks and I can't bring him out of hypnosis?
Well, no one stays stuck in hypnosis,
Right,
right?
right, right.
I mean, that's
Right,
another one of those shibboleths,
right.
or yeah.
But I think people have really had a year of revelation when it comes
Oh,
to
yes.
remote hypnosis, and
Yes.
people learned a lot in the year that has gone by. Do you find that true as your own practice as well?
You mean in terms of my experience of delivering the service, or in
Right.
terms of like the mindset of the clients? How do you
Well,
mean?
everything actually, because I
Okay.
think it was a great year of revelation for a
I
lot of
think so
people.
too. And I'll tell you, I like to call it the Great Awakening,
Yeah.
because if you notice, a lot of the things that people use to divert themselves and for escapism, whether it's the awards shows, or it's this professional sports, or it's the movie theater, all of this kind of diversion industry stuff, their ratings are tanking, right?
Mhm.
And people are like, well, maybe there's more to think about than what I was, you know, um, escaping into,
Right.
right? Maybe it's time to take a more sober look at reality,
Right.
and so I think that has helped people awaken to a great degree.
Eh,
It's just getting out of because you know what? I like to say hypnosis is an everyday experience,
yes.
right? It's like you've been like the light form of hypnosis, which we call alpha brainwave pattern, is the same thing as daydreaming. When you drive your car somewhere, you get there safely and you're like, how the heck did I get here? I don't remember a move I made,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's the light state of hypnosis, but people don't realize it's hypnosis. The athlete would say, I'm in the zone. The artist would say, I'm in flow, right? It's all the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Unconscious
Absolutely.
competence,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Well, when you watch a movie, it's the same brainwave pattern. Your conscious mind goes offline, just like when you're sleeping, right?
Hmm.
Because it says, well, I don't need to sit here and analyze that that's a script and it's shot in the studio, and these people are actors and actresses and they're not real, or at least
Hmm.
not real as far as the truth of the matter is concerned, right? It's an adaptation, it's a play, or it's a movie, right? And so the conscious mind is not being a stickler for all that stuff,
Hmm.
right? So the unconscious mind's now free to have the experience,
Exactly.
right? And so if people are not putting themselves in hypnosis on these kinds of screen experiences, well, maybe they're freed up to go from one form of trance to a different form of trance, and maybe that new form of trance is more empowering for them,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So the hypnosis is an everyday experience, but no one ever bothers to tell us as much. And so what I say is, why not, instead of leaving these hypnotic experiences to random chance, why don't we utilize them for a deliberate positive purpose?
Exactly. Exactly. And it's just, that's the way I kind of help people get over their fear of hypnosis, saying all it is it's just playing around with different states of consciousness,
Hmm.
things that you already do. And
Hmm.
I always tell people, you're the one that's going to make all the changes,
Yep.
really. I'm just going to stand here and open the door and you can go through it.
Yep.
Well, what? This hour is almost up, Eric. I mean,
We're just getting warmed up.
yeah, it went by in such a it's in such a hurry. Before we go, tell
Mhm.
people about your website where they can find you, because you've got a
Okay.
great website.
Well, thank you. I do have my badassrising.me website. So badass, BADASS, rising .me, M-E. So you can find me there. You can also use badassrising.me at gmail.com or Eric at badassrising.me. You can find the book on Amazon, Change the One Belief. And yeah, I'm not very big on social yet. That's coming. You can find me on LinkedIn, actually.
Mhm, mhm.
So you can find me on LinkedIn and just type in Eric Rosen and badass, and you'll find me very easily. And I've got a lot of interesting posts and articles that I've generated over the past quarter or two.
Mhm.
And some of those speak to about these changes in beliefs and actually give you some hands-on techniques about how you can change your state in the moment.
Yeah, and what? I think the design and the photography on your site is really, really good.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
like, what? It made me feel a little bad because mine is like, oh, I've really got, I
Well,
really got to.
I did that myself. The
Oh,
next
really?
round, yeah, and that was using some really good page tools for WordPress. And so it kind of forces you to make good pages in spite of
Oh,
yourself.
nice, nice.
And so kudos to them for that. But the next round will probably be with some professional folks. And yeah, there's a lot of new stuff in the works coming soon. So
Very good.
hopefully we'll be able to reconnect at that time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is there another book coming?
Not yet. I don't have it planned.
Okay.
But I do have a whole bunch of other stuff coming and possibly even training people to replicate my results with clients based on that 4-session program that's outlined in Change the One Belief.
Very, very good. Well, Eric, it has been a pleasure to finally have you on the show.
It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we didn't have a freak snowstorm in June.
A thunder snowstorm.
That's right,
Thunder
thunder
snow.
snowstorm.
Well, it's been great meeting you, and thank you so much for being a part of the New Bridge Radio Show.
It's been a joy, Kevin.
And I want to say to our listeners, thank you for listening and for tuning in. Next week is going to be a great week. We're having medium Jamie Butler come on the New Bridge Radio Show. She is the medium that produced a lot of the channeling Eric work. So it'll be fascinating. It'll be a fascinating hour to be with Jamie. So that does it for us tonight. Have a great rest of the week and take care, and we'll see you next week.